Hello everyone, I'm Sharanya PS, Assistant Professor, Department of ISE, AJIET Mango. In this session onwards, we will discuss about user-defined functions and recursion, which comes under Module 4 of the subject C Programming for Problem Solving. In this session, I do cover the topics like function definition, elements of function, location of the function, and finding the cube and the sum of the programs using functions. What is meant by a function? Function is a group of statements that perform a particular task. It is nothing but a set of statements that take some input, perform some specified computation or task, and produces some output. These functions will be performing the task which is required to be done on behalf of the user. These functions can be categorized majorly into two types. First one, we call it as a built-in function, or which is also called as a library function. One more type is a user-defined function. We have already used this built-in functions or library functions in the previous programs. So these are the function which is provided by the C compiler, which performs some standard and a predefined task. Say for example, in the last session, we have discussed about string length and string copy, string cat. These are all the functions which are defined under the header file called as string.h. We are not going to write the program or the set of statement to perform those operations, which will be pre-written in the function by those names. Say for example, strlen is a function which is responsible for finding the string length. Similarly, we have used printf and scanf functions which are used for displaying and taking the input from the user. And similarly, to perform some mathematical computations like power or to find the square root of two numbers, for that we can use predefined function which is already available in the C compiler, which we can directly use in the program by referring to those names of the function. These kind of the functions we call it as a built-in functions or a library functions. Here we are not bothered about writing the code for that, just we will be calling those functions in the program. And the C compiler will responsible to refer the code which is written in the header file and performing the operation. Next category is a user-defined function. This is a kind that we are going to discuss in depth now. So what is meant by this user-defined function? Here, it allows the programmer to create their own functions as per their requirement. Like suppose if they want to perform any specific task, which may be some computation or some printing task or anything. For that, user is allowed to write his own code, and later they can change those codes and give some names to that. And majorly these kind of functions will be written by the user to perform any customized kind of functions. So these functions majorly classified into built-in functions and user-defined functions. Next, we will see the major two different ways how we can write the program. One kind is without using the user-defined function, or which we call it as a unstructured programming. And one more type is a using user-defined functions, or here we refer it as a structured programming. What is this unstructured programming? The programs that we have come across till now is a unstructured programming. That is, there will be only main function. Inside that, we will write the entire code which will perform the specific task. We will not separate the code which is responsible to perform the task and displaying purpose like that. We are not categorizing the code. We will just write in a single set of codes in a main function. Whereas in the structured programming, here the user will be writing the separate code that we will call it as a function, and that function will be called by the main function, like that. That is what we refer as a structured programming. Now, if we look into the example here, to perform the addition of two numbers, this is what we refer as a unstructured programming. Or the user has not written any separate function to perform the addition of two numbers. This is here we are taking two variables and we are storing the result in the sum variable, and we are trying to display the sum by computation of a plus b. This is, we have written this entire addition of two numbers. This is the task that we are performing under the main function. This is what we call it as a unstructured programming. Now, the question is, what is meant by a structured programming? How it differs? This is an example for a structured programming. Here, the main operation that we are performing is the addition of two numbers. That is, we are taking a and b value from the main, and the function which is responsible for adding two numbers, we have made it as a separate code and we have given the name for that, and this code will be called from the main function. So here we are making the program much more structured. That is, we are separating the major tasks that we are going to do in the program, that is addition, from the main function. This is what we call it as a structured programming. What are the advantages and disadvantages comes under this unstructured and structured programming? We will discuss now. What is this unstructured program? What are the disadvantages under that? Here, major one is difficult to read and understand. That is, we are writing the entire code in the main function itself. So we will not get to know what is the major logic which will perform the actual task which is asked to be performed. So next one is difficult to debug. That is, if any errors are there, if it is a functions are separated, then we may look into that particular code. Whereas here, from first to the last, we have to debug the code. And here testing is also comparatively difficult under this unstructured programming. And modification also, we have to keep checking the code. We cannot make some changes exactly in the code which is responsible for performing the task. We are not supposed to. We have to make the changes in the entire code itself. That is, modifying and testing is much difficult task. And here one more major disadvantage is difficult to reduce the logic. That is, we suppose if I want to add two numbers with the like I need to perform that addition of two numbers multiple times in my program. In such case, I need to keep writing that logic multiple times in the program. So we cannot reuse the logic what we have written. We have to write the logic again and again. These are the disadvantages that we come across under unstructured programming. Now, how we can overcome these disadvantages by using user-defined functions or by referring to the structured programming. First one, that programming becomes easier. That is, here we are writing the code separately which is responsible to perform some specific task from the main function. So here writing of the major task will be much more easier compared to the unstructured programming. And one more, large and complex task can be broken down into smaller and simple tasks using the functions. Like if we want to perform some read operation, we will write the separate function, and for the display we will write the separate function, and for the computation we will write the separate function, and wherever it is required it will be called like that. I can give a best example in the real time. Like suppose if we are constructing a building. Here this construction task which is done by the engineer will not be performed by him all alone. Rather he will be distributing the task. Say for example, interior will be done by set of people, and some carpentry work will be done by the carpenters, and some other contractors will responsible for designing some infrastructure facilities, all those. So these are all divided into multiple tasks, and these tasks will be done by the corresponding people, and once it is done, it will be handed over to the main engineer. This is how the same user-defined functions will also work. Here, separate tasks will be done by the different functions, and the result will be sent back to the main function. As I gave the example, in the house construction also, interior designer will perform interior task, and like that they will be doing their own task, and then the result will be sent or returned back to the main engineer. Same way, here it will be done in the programming aspect as well. And what is a major one more advantage is that is easier debugging. Finding and removing the error is easier. As I mentioned, suppose if there is any issues with the carpentry work, we can directly contact the carpentry person and we can ask them to fix it. Same way, here if we find any error with one particular task, we can look into that function and we can fix it. That is easier debugging. And one more, readability of the program is increased. Since it is in a very structured manner, we can clearly understand which code is responsible to perform that task. And one more advantage is reusability. How it can be reusable? That is, as I gave the example in the previous unstructured programming disadvantage, suppose if we want to add two numbers, the logic is exactly same to add the numbers. Suppose if we want to add multiple numbers, then that same logic we have to keep writing in the different location of the program under main function. Whereas if we are using these functions, then we can write that code which is responsible to perform the addition of two numbers in one function, and we can call that function any times in the program. Wherever it is required, we just need to call that function, and that same function will be referred and it is going to perform the task. That is, function body or definition will be written only once, and it will be called many times in the different places of the program, and it can be used multiple times. This is a one major advantage under user-defined function. So we have looked into some of the disadvantage of unstructured programming and how it can be overcome by using the user-defined function. Now we'll see what are the major elements present in the user-defined function. What are the parts included in the user-defined function? First one, we call it as a function declaration. Next, function definition, and one more as a function call. What is meant by a function declaration? We have previously used, suppose if we are writing some program, then first and foremost thing that we do is, suppose if we are using some variable, we will be declaring the variable in the very beginning of the program. This is how we will be declaring the variable. First we will mention the data type and then variable name with the semicolon. Why it is required? Because we will tell to the compiler well in prior that this is a variable that I am going to use in this program, and which is of a data type integer and reserve some memory for this variable. Same way, here also in the function declaration that we are doing, whichever the function we are going to use in the program, we are well in prior, we are declaring it in the beginning. That is what we call it as a function declaration, which is also called as a function prototype. That is nothing but the way how we write in the very beginning of the program. That is, this function declaration need to be performed before calling the function. That will be done in the very beginning. After writing the header file, before writing the main, we will be declaring the function. What and all these function declaration will contain? That is, first it will contain the return type. Return type in the sense what the result that function will be written in its corresponding data type, that we call it as a return type. We will see with the example. And what is meant by a function name? It is the name of the function. Say for example, if I give the name as a add, then add is a function name. And then we will be passing the parameter list with the data type. Parameter list in the sense, it is simple terms, it is a list of variables that we are going to use in that function, that we call it as a parameter list. Parameter in the sense, simple terms, it is a list of variables that we use in that particular function. And then finally we are terminating that function declaration with a semicolon. This simple terms, this function declaration is similar to variable declaration that we do it in the program. But here variable declaration we are doing inside the main, whereas this function declaration need to be done outside the main. Now let us look into the syntax, how we write this function declaration. First we need to mention the return type. See here, if we look into the example, the return type is a int. That is the data type which is the value returned by that function. Here it is a integer which can be float or it can be double or character, like that. It can be varied depending on the program. Next one, we have to mention the function name. Here that we are using is a add. Add is the function name. And then it is a list of parameters with the data type. Here A and B is nothing but the variable name. And along with that we are mentioning the data type. This is what we call it as a parameter list. So as a whole together, this function declaration will contain the return type. Here in this example it is an integer, and then function name, it is a add, and then there's the parameter list need to be mentioned within the brackets, that is list of variables that we are going to use in that program, along with its data type we are mentioning. And very important point here, this function declaration or function prototype we are ending with the semicolon. This is how we can mention the function declaration. And one main point under this function declaration is, it is not very compulsory if the function definition is written before calling that function. We'll see what does it mean. And one more thing is, here it is not mandatory to write this variable names, that is A and B or the parameter name. Just we can write int add, int comma int. That is also allowed to use in that manner in the C. So this function declaration is the first thing that we have to write soon after writing the header file, before writing the main function. That will give the details about which function we are using in the program. Along with that, what is the return type of that function and the list of the parameters that are used in that function. Next one is a function definition. That is nothing but the actual code for the function to perform a specific task. That is the entire executable code or the task what we are need to perform by that function we are writing inside the function definition. That is what we call it as a actual body of the function. Here the first line that we write is called as a function header, which should be identical to the function prototype. But one point here is without using the semicolon. What is that function prototype? Just now we have discussed what is function prototype. That is one declaration that we are doing in the very beginning of the program, which should remain same as that of the function definition. That is the function definition or the function name what we are giving, it should match to the function prototype along with the argument that we are passing. And it is not having any semicolon. And parameter names have to be specified here with the data type. We cannot omit the parameters that we are listing along with the function definition. These parameters can be called as the arguments or the parameters. And now we'll see what is the syntax and how we are using it. First, this is what we call it as a actual function definition. That is nothing but in simple terms, we are actually defining the function. So what and all it will contain? It will contain the return type, function name and the parameter list with the data type. And inside that we may use some local variable declarations. What is this local variable? As we discussed previously, these are the variables which is having the scope within this function. That is, these variables can be used only inside this function. And then the set of statement that we write inside the function. That is nothing but the executable code that we are writing inside the function need to be written inside the open braces and closing braces. At the end, we will be writing the return statement. As an example here, if we see, that is add is the function name here, int is a return type, and then here we are using two parameters a and b. With the data type here we have to mention, that is int comma int. And what we are writing here, which is need to be similar to what we have declared in the function declaration or in the function prototype. With one major change, here we are not ending up with the semicolon because we are defining the function. After that, we will be opening the braces and closing the braces. This is what we call it as a body of the function. And here we have used one local variable that we call it as a sum with the data type integer. And the sum can be used only inside this add function. And we are computing sum equal to a plus b and we are returning the sum. So the question is, what is the data type of this sum? It is nothing but integer. That we have to write it in the return type. So that's why we have written this int as a data type. Suppose if I declare it as a float sum, then what should be the data type here? It should be float. This is this first data type, what return type what we are writing here. It should match to the return value that we are mentioning inside the function. This is how we can define the function. As we see here with different parts of this function's definition, first if we look into the return type. Return type is the type value returned by the function. Return type might be void, suppose if we are not returning any values. And as we see in the previous example, in this example, here it is an integer because we are returning the integer value. And next one is a function name. It is a unique name that identifies a function. All variable naming conversions are applicable for declaring the valid function name. It should be have some valid name. We cannot use spaces in between or some special symbols. Those are all not entertained if we are defining the function name. And then what is this parameter list? Which are comma separated list of types and the names of the parameters. Here what we are mentioning, the if no parameter is passed, then no need to write this field. Usually we will be the list of parameters will be mentioned, so the value what we are passing from the main will be captured from this list what we are mentioning. And then there is a local variable which declares the variable needed by that function, and its scope is inside that function only. And here some of the values that we write here is returned by the function upon the termination. This is the value that we are going to return. And function body that we call it is whichever it is present set of instruction within the open braces and closing braces, we call it as a body of the function. And the statements, all these we call it as a statement. And with the return keyword if we are using, then we call it as a return statement. These are all comes under function definition. What is meant by a function call? That is, in simple terms, the statement that is used for calling the function. Here, which is majorly used for this function call is majorly used for calling any of the function which is defined in the program. Here, the way how we are using this function call is, we have to mention the function name followed by a list of parameters enclosed in a parenthesis and separated by a comma. If you look into the example here, we are mentioning the function name and then we are mentioning the parameter list within the open and closing brackets with semicolon at the end. As we example, add is the function name here, and parameters that we used is a and B that we are mentioning within the open and closing brackets. Here this is what we call it as a function call. Add is the function name and A and B is the parameter list. And please note, here we are not using any data type with respect to the parameters. Just we are mentioning the parameter names. And these are the three major elements of the function. First, we referred as a function prototype, or we call it as a function declaration, and then function definition and the function call. By using these three elements, now let us build a program which will find a sum of two numbers by using the functions. Here, what is the expected output? Here, it should ask, enter the values of A and B. From the user, it need to take two values, 2 and 3, and it need to be stored in the variables A and B. And finally, it need to compute the sum and it need to display. We have already discussed the program simply by writing the entire code in the main. Now, let us write this program by using the functions. As first, we should begin with the header file, which is responsible for standard input-output. And the very first statement that we begin after the header file is a function declaration, or which is also called as a function prototype. What is the way how we write the function prototype? That is return type and then function name and the list of parameters with the data type. That is, we are using int a comma int b. And one more major aspect is we are ending with the semicolon because it is a function declaration. We are indicating to the compiler that this is a function with these data types and return value we are going to use in this program. And we are writing the main. In the main, we are using two variable A and B and also sum, which is used to store the result. And we are asking for the user to enter the values of A and B in the printf statement, and with the scanf statement, we are reading the values from the user. Please ignore this bracket. And then after that, we are calculating the sum. What is the way here? Before we used to perform the addition of two numbers in this particular main function itself. Now, our task is to perform this addition in a separate function. So, now our task is to call the function which is responsible to perform that operation. That is, what is the function that we have written? Add. And what is the parameters it uses? A and B. And then whatever the result after computation of addition of A and B, it need to store the result back in the variable sum. That is, returned value by this function will be stored in the variable sum. If we look into the next statement, that we are printing the result, that is after computation of this addition of two numbers, the result is present in the variable now sum. So we are printing that sum is by using the printf statement, and this is what we have written in the main. Now coming to the function definition, that is the actual function that we are writing inside. This is which need to be matched with the function declaration. Yes, and then we are defining, that is we have opened the bracket, and inside that I'm trying to compute the sum. That is we have declared one variable as a sum. This we called as a local variable, and the major computation that we perform is sum equal to a plus b. That is whatever the value here we are mentioning a and b. Say for example 2 and 3 is entered by the user. Now the value of a and b is 2 and 3. That will be passed to this function, that is which a will contain 2 and b will contain 3. So the computation will be 2 plus 3, and the result will be stored back in the variable called as sum. And after that, the next task is we have to return the result back onto the main function. So we are using return sum. So after this computation, this code will be whatever the value we are computed, that is 2 plus 3, 5. Suppose if we are mentioning, it will be returned back onto the program sum. So how will be the final result? It will be sum will be 5. So it is going to display as sum is 5. So with respect to these two inputs, the sum should be 5. Suppose if it is a 10 plus 20, then the sum will be 30. If we look into how this entire program will work, we'll see what is the way how it is going to execute with the different statements, the way how the computation will work, and what is the way it is going to do. First, we have declared the function, yes, and with its return type and function name and parameter list. And then we have written the function definition, and in the main we have called the function. These are the three elements that we have discussed. Now, how it will be processed. First, with this statement, it is clear that the function that we are using is a add, and with the arguments a and b. Now, as we discussed here also, the program will begin its execution from the main itself. So here it will take a and b, and it is taking two input from the user. Next, the function will be called by using the statement add a comma b. What this a comma b will be referred, that is a and b's value, whatever it is entered by the user, along with that this function will be called. So the control will be moved to the function wherever it is written in the program. And sum equal to, that is whatever the return value we are mentioning, that in order to catch this we have used one variable by the name sum. So whenever the compiler see this function call, the control will be moved to that function. Int add, int a comma, int b. So this function definition is going to be executed. That is, it will make use of local variable and compute the sum, and the sum will be returned back. So here the sum, whatever the value it is computed, it is going to be written as a result of this add function, and it will be captured or stored in the variable sum. So after that the execution continues with the next statement, that is sum is, it is going to display the sum. This is how this entire program will work with respect to functions. Next program, write a C program to find a cube of a number using the function. Here the major task is to find the cube. So for that purpose, we have to write a separate function who is responsible for computation of a cube. And The function need to be called from the main function, and in the very beginning we have to declare the function. These are the three major aspects we have to look into when we write the program using functions. We have started with the header file and we have declared the function in the very beginning. Now one slight change here, that is, as I mentioned previously, this function definition or function declaration or function prototype is not mandatory if we are defining the function before the main. That is the concept that we are using here. Here, before writing the main function, we have defined the entire function itself. Because of that, we have not defined the function, we have not declared the function in the very beginning. The function declaration is omitted since we are using function definition before the main function. Here what the function we have written: int cube int num. We are passing the num and we are computing the result int result, that is we are computing the cube of 3 numbers and we are storing the result in the result variable, and then we are returning the result. Now looking to the main, how it is performed. In the main we are using two variables, num and the result. Num is a variable for which the value will be taken from the user, and this is what we refer as a function call, that is cube, and the argument that we pass here is only one, that is a number that is entered by the user. We have to use the same variable name here when we pass, and now whenever the compiler see this statement, it will search for the num function. Here it finds in the program and this code will be executed, and we are returning the result back onto the main. So after the statement, the result whatever it is computed will be present in the result variable, and finally we are trying to display the result. This is how we can write the program to find the cube of the number. From this program, the major takeaway is, one is, here we have omitted the function declaration or function prototype because we have written the function definition prior to the main. That is one possible. Suppose if we are writing the main and after that we are writing the function definition, then we need to write the function definition. And second point is, here we have written the separate function to perform the cube. These are the two major takeaways from this program. So how would be the output? First, it is asking for the user to enter a number. Suppose if the user has entered 2, now the num value is 2. So the next one is, the program execution will start from the main. Now cube function will be called with the num value as 3. So the function control will move to the program part where the function definition is mentioned. So cube and int num, this is the way function header will be written, and then num value is nothing but 2 into 2 into 2. The result will be stored as 8 here, and the result will be written back to the main. So result will contain the value as 8 now, and finally it is going to display the result. Q is 8. This is how internally when the function is called, it will go to the function definition wherever it is written in the program, and then it will execute that part of the program, and then it will go the continuation of that main. So this is how the functions will work. And here we will refer two terminologies, one as a calling and a called function. Suppose if I call someone, then I am the one who will be the calling one, and the person to whom I called will be the called person. The same way, here it will be applicable to the functions. The function which calls another function is called as a calling function. In our example here, that we call it as a main. The main function from where we are calling the another function. That's why this main we call it as a calling function. As I gave the example, I am the person who called someone. So I will be the calling person. Next one, the function which is called by the another function is called as a called function. So which is the example, add is a function which will be called by the main function. So called function is nothing but add. So in the example, the person who I called will be the called person. This is how we will refer to the function as a calling function and the called function. Calling function is a function which will be calling some other function as the main, and called is a function which called by some other function, that is the add function. Now we'll see where and all we can use the function definition in the program. That is what we refer as a location of the function. That is nothing but the placement of the function definition with reference to the main function. Three ways we can write this functions in a function program by mentioning this function definition in three different places. First one is placing a function definition in the very first. In the first, we will be writing the function definition followed by the entire main program. We have seen one example previously that cube is this kind of type 1. Here in this case, declaring the function prototype can be omitted. It is not a mandatory. See, here in this function, declaration is not an mandatory step, we can omit. After that, we are writing the function body and then the main program will be there. That's why here we are writing the function body in the very prior itself. So the compiler need not to search for the code. Well, beginning of the program itself, it is there. That's why this statement can be function declaration can be omitted. This is what we referred as a function definition. Since we are writing this function definition before the main, that's why this statement function prototype can be omitted. This is the optional. One more type, second type is the body of the function, that is function definition are placed after the main function. That is, this is the example what we have discussed to find the sum of two numbers program by using function. That is, place the function prototype well before the main program. We have to compulsorily write the function prototype in the very beginning of the code. And it is mandatory for the compiler to understand what is the return type and what is the data type it uses. That's why we have to write in the very beginning, because the code will start execution from the main. When it finds this, well in prior itself, it is clear that it is a return type is a int and it takes two arguments. That's why this function declaration is mandatory. If we are using the main function and then we are mentioning the function definition. This is how we are using the second way, the location of the function. And that is, the function definition is present after the main. Then the function declaration is mandatory. Suppose if the function definition is prior to the main, then function declaration is not a mandatory. These are the 2 points that we should be clear about this. Next, one more way is type 3. That is, the function body is placed in one file. That is, function definition is stored in a separate file and the main program with function prototype will be mentioned in one more file. If you look into the example here, we have created one file by the name add.h. This h refers to it is a header file, and we have defined the function int addition int x comma y. X and y is a variable name or parameter names that we refer, and we are computing the sum. And this is what we refer as a function definition. This will be stored in the file called as add.h. It is a completely separate file now. And how we can use that in the program file that is called as a addition.c. In the addition.c, we are invoking the file what we have written by the name add.h. That is, we have created it as a header file. That header file need to be included in the program. That is nothing but in the add.h we have written the function definition. So in order to add that file to the current file called as addition.c, we have to include that file by using #include with that add.h with the angular braces. And in the main what we are writing, that is we are using two variables n1 and n2. Here we have used a separate name, variable name that we can use like that. And we will see what does it mean all those in the upcoming sessions. And we are computing the addition of those two numbers, that is nothing but the function call. When it calls the function addition n1 comma n2, this addition is written in add.h. That content will be referred and it is computing the sum and displaying the sum. This is the third type of usage of function definition. So we have seen three different locations where we can store the function definition. First one before the main, and after the main, and in a separate file itself. These are the major topics that we have discussed in this session. Thank you for listening.